17 military personnel talk about the creepiest thing they've seen on duty. Case 1. Empty boats. U.S. Navy photographer here. In the deepest parts of the ocean, you will often steam past small boats that are empty or seemingly empty. Sometimes they look like they got loose and no one looked for them. Sometimes they look disgusting, like someone lived in them until they couldn't. Sometimes it's obvious someone is still in them, but they haven't moved for weeks. By Light Wolf. Case 2. Laughing Soldiers. There were multiple instances of North Vietnamese soldiers just walking straight up to US forces in the middle of combat. They'd look at them, and they wouldn't even raise their weapons or unsling them. They would just start laughing at the US soldiers. Then the US guys would shoot them. I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation for why this happened, but it's pretty creepy that the enemy might just walk up to you and just start laughing in your face, seemingly not caring whether you shoot him or not. By Evan 466. Case 3. A grave. As a Marine, I used to have the graveyard patrol shift at the Beirut bombing memorial. Part of the memorial is dedicated to a veteran cemetery. Oddly enough, I never got freaked out being completely alone in a remote cemetery in the middle of the night, surrounded by dense wood on all sides. It was actually kind of peaceful, to be honest. However, one night I was patrolling near the perimeter fence, where some of the oldest headstones are, when I heard a sound of a woman humming. I followed the sound and noticed the light glowing through the vines and the brush at a large tree. As I approached, I could literally feel my hair beginning to lift, as if there was an electric current in the air. I pushed aside the brush, and what I saw nearly took my breath away. It was an old, weathered headstone with a large cross etched into marble. Only the cross was glowing, a bright, vivid blue with a neon bulb. The humming was also suddenly much louder and had a weird plurality to it, like it was coming from hundreds of voices at once. Needless to say, I freaked the fuck out. I screamed like a scared little girl and sprinted back to the parking lot. I radioed the guard who was supposed to relieve me and forced him to come early, then spent the rest of my shift in the cab of his truck. I don't think he believed me, but he stayed in his truck and didn't go out on patrol until the sun was fully up. A few days later, I worked up the nerve to return to the grave, during the day of course. As I suspected, in the light of the day it was a completely mundane headstone. There was no name, only the aforementioned cross. I ran my hands over the cross and checked to see if maybe there was some sort of hidden light source or solar panel. But no, it was just plain, solid, unremarkable stone. The humming was gone too. I eventually returned to my normal shift, but never again experienced anything out of the ordinary. I never learned whose grave it was, either, but I find myself thinking about it all the time. It certainly sounds absurd when I say it out loud, and I suppose it could have been a hallucination or a trick of my tired brain, but I don't believe it was. I think it was real, a ghost or spirit of some sort, but I don't think it was malevolent at all. By Rainbow Grimm. Case 4. Screams. We wrote it off as some of the instructors messing with us, but while training at JWTC, there was a cold-blooded scream in the middle of the night. Definitely sounded like a woman. The lieutenant in charge made us do a quick accountability check. Then he started radioing the training center to see what the hell happened. The instructors then went out from their compound, did some checks, but didn't find anything. They said it's not the first time they've had units out there calling in to report the same thing. By Boss A. Vary. Case 5. A phantom smoker. Is a dude vanishing spooky enough? I was on one rooftop on post with another Marine, and on the building next to me was a dude smoking a cigarette. I looked to my partner to mention it, but when I looked again, he was gone. The roof access door for that building was very rusty and loud, so there's no way he'd snuck out in those few seconds it took to get my partner's attention. By I Am Reese. Case 6. Lights in the Sky. Not my story, so I'll tell it the best I can. This happened during a rotation at National Training Center sometimes in 2015. A battle was occurring at night. A light appeared in the sky, and for 10 minutes or so there was silence. This may not seem too interesting until you look at the numbers and statistics. You're looking at a massive amounts of people and equipment doing a rotation. Constant radio chatter, vehicle noise, people talking, etc. And suddenly just nothing. Then the light seemed to make a couple of strange turns, one being turn around 90 degrees and split and disappear. By Blackjack 357. Case 7. Ghost Soldiers. I was by myself in the engine room of a submarine on the mid-watch. Just a newly reported sailor trying to find equipment so I could display knowledge to one of the watchstanders. There are a number of bays in the engine room's lower level, with narrow passages that pass through the center. I came down one of the ladders, and I swore I saw someone walk across the ship about 15 feet in front of me. I could hear his footsteps as he walked around a corner and out of sight. 3 problems. 1. He was wearing utilities, an older light blue blouse, and dark navy slacks. Nobody had utilities no more. They had been phased out 3 years earlier. 2. There was only one other person awake in the engine room that late at night, and he was standing on the top of the ladder behind me, waiting for me to come back up with an answer to his question. 3. He wasn't actually there. I wrote it off as sleep deprivation, but I'll admit it shook me for a while. Fast forward to 4 months later. I had gone out to sea with another submarine of the same type. While I was there, I met a sailor who had previously served on my ship. After a few weeks of standing watch with him, he told me a story of a sailor who had committed suicide while on watch when he served on my ship almost a decade earlier. In the engine's room's lower level, in his utilities. I wish I could have gotten a picture of the look of my face. I'm sure it was the definition of disbelief. By Ice Sir. Case 8. More ghosts. A friend of mine went to Afghanistan and got stationed in an area that was used as a base by the Soviets. He swears that sometimes when he was on sentry duty, he could hear whispers that didn't sound like English or the local languages. He's convinced he heard Russian. By Tofu Delivery Boy. Case 9. Triangular UFO. One time, at an Air Force base in the ROK, we had a power outage at night. All of us walked out of the hangar doors to see what the problem may have been, and we saw a very, very large triangular shape passing over our hangar. It was a clear moonless night previously, and when we went outside to look around, we noticed the starscape being covered, then slowly uncovered. No sound associated with the event, other than the normal sounds of the location. I'll never forget it. By Snoogoose. Gollum. One of my drill sergeants actually has a creepy story from one of his Afghanistan deployments. He was infantry, so being in the field and out of missions for multiple weeks wasn't uncommon. One night while sleeping in a fighting position he felt something nibbling at his feet. He woke up and kicked it off. And what he saw wasn't any type of marsupial, but a little humanoid figure he could only describe as looking just like Gollum. But being in the field with very little sleep, he chalked it up to just seeing things. A couple of days later, he and another guy was on watch, and the other guy pointed out something and said, "What the fuck is that?" and pointed at a stone wall in the distance. My drill sergeant looked through his binoculars, and crawling across the top of the stone wall was the exact little humanoid creature he had seen before. Navy. When I was in Groton, Cincinnati, for basic enlisted submarine school, I was roaming the barracks at night. I had a UI under instruction, so I was showing him the ropes, what to check and how to check it. It was mainly fire extinguishers, secured doors. Well, on second and third floor of the barracks, there is a recreation room with a TV and chairs and a piano. Mind you, everyone was asleep, and it was 2 in the morning. Well, I decided to go see if I remembered how to play the piano a little. We decided to continue to finish the patrol. So we started walking down the hall when we heard a single piano note go off. We both heard it while we were in mid-conversation. So we kinda looked back, and then we both looked at each other to see if we both heard the same noise. We shrugged it off as our imaginations running wild. But as soon as we got to the end of the hall and opened the door to the stairway, a sharp key was heard coming from down the hall in the direction of the room with the piano. We left the floor as soon as possible and later shared the story with some shipmates. They told us stories of sailors that had died in those barracks. By Compact 2598. Submarine ghosts. Submariner here. There are few things as unnerving as wandering about the engine room from 11:30 to 5:30 alone on watch. When the boat is largely shut down in port, it becomes a very quiet place. The rowing watchers usually making it an hourly game to speed through their log rounds, especially in the lower levels. One particular port period, the boat was moored in Pearl Harbor, and a few people started complaining about a real uneasy feeling. I was on the mid-watch as SEO on evening, and a senior chief came back to do his required 3 o'clock tour. We saw him walk past maneuvering on his way to the shaft alley. This particular senior chief was the crusty old salt type, and would usually spend a bit time just sitting on the lower levels of the engine room alone and contemplate life. So we expected as much. What we didn't expect was him to literally run into the maneuvering area a few minutes later. The man was pale-faced and breathing heavily. We sat up straight, our eyes as wide as his, thinking we were about to have to announce and fight some ship casualty. He slumps into the EDO chair. A few tense and silent moments goes by. We're on points and needles. He finally opens his mouth and tells us about the fucking ghost in the shaft alley. Swears a sailor passes him as he's sitting on the trash can in the shaft alley. His first response was to call out to the guy to see who it was. But then he realizes this guy isn't dressed right. He describes what this guy was wearing, the old Second World War naval uniforms. So he quickly gets up to catch the guy, and he does. Catches up to him all the way. The guy turns towards the senior chief, looks right at him, then turns away and literally walks through the end of the boat. It's now that the senior chief decides it's time to leave the shaft alley, and promptly does so. Swears up and down that he knows what he saw. I sure as hell wasn't about to leave maneuvering that night to find out for myself. By Driftwolf. Cemetery Ghost. I worked in Arlington National Cemetery while I was in the Army. The tomb guards always talked about seeing or just hearing soldiers marching some nights. We were cataloging graves one night when I thought I saw a soldier in my team up ahead, so I called him over. He answered from behind me. When I looked back, the soldier was gone. I'm a skeptic, and I believe everything paranormal has a real-world explanation, but I'm still trying to figure that one out. By Chris Berman, 410.